Good afternoon. Today we're going to be working on Lesson 2, and we're going to be constructing a box and whisker plot. We'll work on page 2 and then page 3, so please make sure you're on that page in your packet. You may notice that we're going to have many new vocabulary words and kind of an odd-looking graph. On this graph, there are certain points, and that's what these terms refer to. So let's start with what's called the lower extreme. So this would be the lowest number in our data. And it's located right here, so that makes logical sense. Our next vocabulary word is called the upper extreme. And if you might have guessed, that's going to be our greatest number in the data set that we're given. And once again, that makes sense. That's located at the top of this box and whisker graph. The median is actually the median of all of the data. And that's located right here. So please make sure you have those points. The next number that we're going to locate, or we're going to find and then we're going to locate, is referred to as the first quartile. And that's located right here. And you may notice that the word quartile begins with QUA, which refers to quarters or quadrant. In math, when we talk about quad or quarters, we're talking about fourths. And this graph, as you see, is breaking pieces. This is the first quarter of the data, the second quarter of the data, the third quarter of the data, and the fourth quarter of the data. And we find that by finding the median of the first half of the data. Our next vocabulary word talks about the third quartile. So that is the median of the second half of the data. And as you may have guessed, that is located here. It is the end of the box and the beginning of the second whisker, what we refer to as a whisker. So there's one more vocabulary phrase, and a word rather, term, and that is the interquartile range. So interquartile range. And that is this section right here that starts at the first quartile and goes to the third quartile. And that's the range of numbers that is 50% of the center of the data. So now please turn to page 3, and at any time you can pause the video again to copy down any of the notes. Please make sure that you're now on page 3, and there's a typo that needs to be corrected before we begin. So would you look at where the word second quartile, and please change that to third quartile. So in order to construct a box and whisker plot, we need to find the 5 key points that we mentioned that are needed to create the box and whisker plot from our data set. And here's our data set we're going to work with. It's extremely important to put the data in order first because we're working with medians. So let's start with the number 10, followed by 15, 17, then 19, 20, and 21, 23, 24, and 25, 27, and then there are two 30s. It's always a wise idea to go back and count and see how many data items you should have. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 data items. So we should have 12 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So all numbers are accounted for. So we'll start by finding our lower extreme, which is the lowest number. And our lowest number is 10. Followed by our upper extreme, which is the number 30. So our median, our second quartile number, so that's the true median of the data, we're going to find, and instead of crossing off the numbers, I want to make sure we can still see the numbers. So I'm just going to check them off as I go from each end of the data until I reach the center. So we've checked off 3 from each end, 4, 5, and then we're left with 2 data items in the center. And when we are not finding just one number in the center, that means we have to find the center of those 2 numbers. And we do that by adding the numbers. So we will get 44, and we take 44 and divide it by 2. And that's going to give us 22, which makes sense. 22 is right in between 21 and 23. So that divides our data into a first half and a second half. And so the first quartile means we now need to find the median of that first half of data. So once again, we're going to start from both ends of the data and check off numbers. Some teachers refer to this as closing the curtain. So I'm taking 1 from each end, taking 2 from each end, and then once again, we have 2 numbers in the middle. So we're going to add those 2 numbers, 17 plus 19, and that would be 36. And then we're going to divide 36 by 2, which is going to give us 18. So 18 is the center between 17 and 19. And that will be our first quartile point. All right, and now we're going to go to our third quartile, the median of the second half of the data. So we're going to start from this point and move here. Once again, we're going to try to cross off at each end. So we're going to cross off 23 and 30, and then 24 and second 30. And then we're again left with 2 numbers in the center. So we add those 2 numbers, 25 and 27, which is 52, which we'll divide by 2, and that's going to give us 26, which again makes sense. 26 is in between 25 and 27. So we now have our 5 points that we need to create the graph. So let's explore quickly the number line. The number line's been created for you, and we see the lowest number is 8. the highest number is 32, and this graph goes up by 2. So this would be 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, and 32. Our lowest data item is 10. So if we're counting by twos, we're going to find 10, and we draw this graph above the number line. We don't put the points on the number line. So we're going to place a point. That's our lower extreme. That's beginning of the whisker, beginning of the whole graph. We're going to next go to our upper extreme, and that's the number 30. So if this is 32, if we count down one set of twos, we're going to go directly above that, and we're going to place our upper extreme. Again, if you prefer to do this in order of numerical order, you're certainly welcome to do that. I'm taking the points as given for what we've done. So our next point is the median, the true median. So that is at point 22. So if we find 20, we're going to go over 1, and we're going to go right directly above. And we're going to place a point, followed then by our first quartile point, 18. So again, we're at 20, and if we go backward by 2, that's going to give us 18. So we're going to put a point right there at 18. And then we have 26. 26 would be 22, 24, and 26 directly above that. So this is our final point that we're going to graph. So we're going to start with our interquartile range. So we're going to start, if you recall what he talked about yesterday in that video, we're going to start with the box. So we're going to put 2 vertical lines, which are the ends of the box. And what we're creating right now is the interquartile range box. And then we're going to put another vertical line through our true median, the median of the data. And then we're going to take our lower extreme and connect it to our first quartile. So that's the first quarter of the graph represented by the whisker. And we're going to take our third quartile and connect it to our upper extreme, and that creates the second whisker, or the last quarter of our data. So this is how you make a box and whisker. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you for next lesson.